I watched 15 years of my career disappear in 10 seconds, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. The projector was still running when my security badge went from green to red. I thought it was just another system glitch at first. You know how corporate tech works, always breaking down when you need it most. But then every screen in the boardroom went dark, and I saw Scarlett Whitfield straighten her designer blazer. "Caleb will be transferring full ownership of Quantum Shield to Apex Dynamics," she announced like she was ordering lunch. "Effective immediately. I'm Caleb Morrison, 48 years old, and I just got schooled by a 31-year-old MBA who thinks coding is something her assistants do. Quantum Shield wasn't just software. It was the cybersecurity framework protecting half the Defense Department's classified networks. The system I'd built from scratch since I started at this company 15 years ago. Every line of code, every security protocol, every backup system, all mine. Now this kid was claiming it like she'd invented the internet herself. Nobody spoke. Not Maxwell Whitfield, the CEO and her grandfather, not the legal team sitting there with their expensive suits and useless law degrees. Not even the project managers who'd built their whole careers riding my coattails. I closed my presentation, shut down my tablet, and gathered my notes. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. Scarlett finally looked at me with those cold blue eyes. "You'll receive official termination paperwork within the hour," she said, sliding a folder across the polished table. "Thank you for your foundational contributions." Foundational contributions. Like I was some intern who'd helped organize the supply closet. I signed the termination form without reading it. What was the point? But before I walked out, I stopped at the door and turned back. "Scarlett," I said, keeping my voice steady, "have you read Section 18.7 carefully?" The company's chief counsel, same guy who'd helped me write that section back in 2015, suddenly found his shoes really interesting. Scarlett just stared at me like I was speaking Chinese. I smiled once. The kind of smile you give someone right before their world falls apart. Then I walked out. The elevator ride felt like a funeral march. 15 years at Apex Dynamics, and now my badge wouldn't even get me past the lobby turnstiles. I had to wait for someone else to swipe me through like some random visitor in my own building. My office still smelled like burnt coffee and the ozone from my personal servers. The walls were covered with patents, system diagrams, and photos from the early days when we actually thought we were changing the world. On my desk sat the framed certificate for Quantum Shield's original patent filing. My name right there in official government print. I started packing. Not rushing. That would have felt like admitting defeat. The white lab coat behind my chair went into the box first. Still had coffee stains from last week's all-nighter debugging the authentication protocols. Then the personal stuff. Family photos, Sarah's acceptance letter to medical school, the world's best dad mug Linda bought me when I made senior VP. Linda. I'd have to call her soon, explain how our carefully planned financial future just got torpedoed by corporate politics. Sarah's medical school tuition, $60,000 a year. Linda's cancer follow-up treatments, another $2,000 monthly, even with insurance. The mortgage we'd been paying for 20 years. All of it suddenly hanging by a thread because some spoiled brat thought she could steal 15 years of my work with a boardroom announcement. As I packed, my computer chimed with a notification I'd hoped I'd never see. Section 18.7 Verification Protocol active. I stared at the screen, remembering the day I'd buried that little piece of insurance in our contract template. It was 2015, right after the company went public and Maxwell started talking about modernizing our intellectual property framework. Corporate speak for figuring out how to screw the people who actually built this place. Garrett Williams, Apex's founder, used to say innovation requires integrity. But Garrett retired 5 years ago, and the new regime preferred words like streamline, optimize, and monetize. They'd forgotten that real value wasn't in the paperwork. It was in understanding how the systems actually worked. I closed the laptop and headed home with a cardboard box that contained 15 years of my professional life. That evening, I sat in my kitchen while Linda made dinner. After 23 years of marriage, she could read me like source code. "How was work?" she asked, not really looking up from the stove. "I got fired." She stopped stirring and turned around. "What happened?" Scarlett Whitfield decided she wanted to own Quantum Shield, Apparently building something from scratch doesn't matter if you can't play corporate politics. Linda sat down across from me, reaching for my hand. What does this mean for us? I looked at Sarah's tuition bill on the counter. Linda's medical insurance through my job, our retirement savings that were supposed to kick in when I turned 55. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I might have a backup plan. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Section 18.7, buried in every major contract Apex had signed since 2015. It was a simple fail-safe. Any transfer of intellectual property required dual verification between our internal systems and the Federal Patent Registry. Without both signatures, ownership automatically reverted to the original creator. I'd written that clause after watching too many brilliant engineers get screwed by boardroom politics. If someone ever tried to steal what I'd built, the system would remember who really created it. The next morning, I watched Scarlett's press conference from a coffee shop downtown. There she was, standing behind Apex's podium like she owned the world, announcing that Quantum Shield was now fully under company control. She looked so confident talking about next-generation cybersecurity and strategic intellectual property acquisition. The reporters were eating it up. Young, smart, obviously connected. Exactly the kind of story they loved. The granddaughter carrying on the family legacy, modernizing a dusty old tech company for the digital age. What a load of garbage. What she didn't know was that every word she spoke was being recorded by federal monitoring systems. When you claim ownership of defense-related intellectual property, certain government agencies pay attention. And when your paperwork doesn't match the official patent registry, they pay very close attention. My phone buzzed during her speech. Unknown number. Mr. Morrison, this is Agent Patricia Reynolds, Federal Cybersecurity Commission. We've received some conflicting information about the Quantum Shield ownership transfer. The signature verification isn't matching our records. Would you be available for a brief conversation? I smiled for the first time since yesterday's meeting. Absolutely. When would be convenient? How about this afternoon? We're particularly interested in understanding the technical architecture of the system. After I hung up, I sat back and watched Scarlett finish her performance. She was taking questions now, looking completely relaxed. Someone asked about the transition timeline for existing contracts. We expect seamless integration, she said. Our internal teams have been preparing for this transition for months. Internal teams. Right. She probably couldn't even spell encryption without autocorrect. That afternoon, I met Agent Reynolds at a federal building downtown. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, but sharp, really sharp. She'd done her homework. Walk me through the original patent filing, she said, pulling out a thick folder. Specifically the verification protocols you embedded in the system architecture. For the next 2 hours I explained how Quantum Shield worked. Not the marketing nonsense that Scarlett had spouted, but the real technical details. How the authentication layers prevented unauthorized access. How the backup verification systems cross-referenced multiple databases. How every single component required specific credentials that only I possessed. So if someone tried to transfer ownership without proper authorization, Agent Reynolds said slowly, what would happen? The system would reject the transfer and flag it as a security breach. Everything would lock down automatically to prevent unauthorized access to classified networks. She nodded and made a note. And Ms. Whitfield's signature yesterday, did that include the proper authorization codes? No, it couldn't have. She doesn't have access to them. Interesting. Agent Reynolds closed the folder. We'll be conducting a full audit of the transfer documentation. In the meantime, I'd suggest you avoid any public statements about this situation. 3 days later, I was sitting in my car, outside Apex Dynamics at 5:30 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the building golden. My laptop was open on the passenger seat, showing a simple interface I'd built years ago but never thought I'd actually use. The Sunrise Protocol. I'd named it that because the best time to execute a failsafe is at dawn, when most corporate executives are still asleep and the overnight systems have had time to process all the previous day's transactions. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it would be too late to stop. At exactly 6 o'clock a.m., I entered my authentication code and hit execute. The system kicked in immediately, connecting to verification nodes I'd embedded throughout our network infrastructure. First, it checked the Federal Patent Registry, then it cross-referenced the original contract signatures. Finally, it compared the biometric data from Scarlett's ownership claim with the authorized user database. Mismatch detected. Initiating ownership reversal. Inside the building, I could see lights starting to flicker. Not a power outage, something much more precise. Every server connected to Quantum Shield was receiving the same message. Unauthorized transfer detected, reverting to original owner. By 6:15, every Apex-controlled account tied to our defense contracts had been frozen. By 6:30, the Federal Cybersecurity Commission was executing search warrants. By 7 o'clock, trading in Apex stock had been halted pending investigation. I drove home and made coffee while I watched the news coverage. Scarlett was on every channel, looking considerably less confident than she had 3 days ago. The reporters were asking different questions now. How did Apex lose control of its primary asset? What does this mean for ongoing government contracts? Is it true that federal investigators are treating this as a case of intellectual property fraud? The stock ticker at the bottom of the screen told the real story. Apex Dynamics down 64% in pre-market trading. $15 billion in market value gone before most people had finished their morning coffee. Maxwell Whitfield held an emergency press conference that afternoon, trying to spin the situation as a minor administrative issue that would be resolved quickly through proper channels. But you could see the panic in his eyes. The call came that evening. Maxwell himself this time, not some HR flunky or corporate lawyer. "Caleb, please, we need to talk." I was sitting on my back porch, watching the sunset through the trees Linda had planted when we first bought the house. 20 years ago, when we thought we'd be here forever, when we thought loyalty mattered in corporate America. About what, Maxwell? You know about what? The protocol, the federal investigation, all of it. What do you want? I took a sip of beer and watched a neighbor walking his dog. Same routine every evening at 7:30. Some things you can count on. "I want what I've always wanted," I said. "Fair recognition for fair work. Name your price. Stock options, consulting fee, board position, whatever it takes." It's not about money, Maxwell. It's about principle. You let your granddaughter steal 15 years of my work because you thought I was too old to fight back. Turns out the system disagreed. The line went quiet for a long moment. I could hear voices in the background, probably lawyers and board members trying to figure out how to spin this disaster. Then, "The board will never approve giving you back control. They don't have a choice. Check the patent registry. As of 6 o'clock a.m. today, Quantum Shield belongs to Morrison Security Systems, LLC. Apex just became my first licensing client. If they want to keep using my system, they'll need to negotiate terms. You can't be serious. Dead serious. And Maxwell? The licensing fee is $50 million annually, paid quarterly in advance. First payment due in 30 days. I hung up and went inside to tell Linda the news. The next morning, I drove to Kane Mitchell's apartment. Kane was one of the young engineers who'd worked directly under me for 3 years. Bright kid, really understood the technical side, but more importantly, he had integrity. He'd been the only one to send me a text after the firing. "This is wrong, I'm sorry." Kane answered the door in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, looking like he hadn't slept much. "Mr. Morrison, what are you doing here?" "Call me Caleb. I've got a proposition for you. You still interested in working on cybersecurity systems? Or are you happy being Scarlett's code monkey?" He laughed, despite himself. "What did you have in mind?" "Morrison Security Systems. Just got our first contract. $5.8 billion over 7 years from the Department of Defense. I need someone who understands the technical architecture and isn't afraid of hard work." Kane's eyes went wide. "Are you serious?" "Kid, I don't joke about business. You interested or not?" "Hell yes. When do we start?" "Monday. But first you're going to need to submit your resignation to Apex. Make it effective immediately." Kane grinned. "This is going to be fun." Over the next week, 3 more engineers quit Apex to join Morrison Security Systems. All of them people I'd trained, people who understood that building something real mattered more than playing corporate politics. Scarlett was hemorrhaging talent and didn't even know why. The federal investigation moved fast. Agent Reynolds called me Friday afternoon with an update. "We've completed our audit," she said. Ms. Whitfield's signature was indeed fraudulent. She used executive override protocols without proper authorization. The Defense Department is terminating all contracts with Apex Dynamics effective immediately. What happens now? Emergency bidding for a replacement primary contractor. Given that you're the original system architect and Morrison Security Systems holds the valid patents, you're obviously the leading candidate. Assuming you're interested. Very interested. Good. Submit your proposal by Monday. The contract award should be finalized within 2 weeks. That weekend, Linda and I sat at the kitchen table working out the numbers. Morrison Security Systems would net approximately $800 million annually. After taxes, overhead, and payroll, we were looking at more money than we'd ever dreamed of. Sarah's tuition is covered, Linda said, checking her calculator. My medical bills paid off. The mortgage, gone, I finished. Plus enough to set up college funds for grandkids we don't even have yet. Linda leaned back in her chair. You know what the best part is? What? You did it the right way. No backstabbing, no corporate politics, no dirty tricks, just good engineering and patience. She was right. I could have tried to sabotage Scarlett's career or leak embarrassing information to the press. But that's not who I am. I built a system that protected itself, and when someone tried to steal it, the system fought back automatically. Clean, legal, and absolutely devastating. Monday morning, I submitted Morrison Security Systems' proposal for the Defense Department contract. By Wednesday, 3 major defense contractors had called asking about partnership opportunities. By Friday, we had preliminary approval for the full $5.8 billion contract. The news broke that afternoon. Morrison Security Systems wins massive defense contract was the headline on every tech blog and financial website. The article mentioned that I was the original architect of Quantum Shield and had recently left Apex Dynamics to start my own company. No mention of theft, fraud, or corporate backstabbing. Just a straightforward business story about an experienced engineer striking out on his own. Perfect. Scarlett's career in tech was effectively over. She'd become a cautionary tale about the dangers of trying to claim credit for work you didn't do. Maxwell stepped down as CEO the following month, citing health concerns and a desire to spend more time with family. The board brought in a new leadership team to try to rebuild Apex's reputation, but they never recovered their dominance in government contracting. The best part? Kane Mitchell turned out to be an excellent business partner. Within 6 months, we'd hired 20 engineers and opened an office in downtown Seattle. Within a year, we were competing for contracts with companies 10 times our size and winning. CEO's niece stole my 4.2B patent and fired me, so I activated my hidden protocol and destroyed her empire. Part 4 of 4, final. 2 years later, I was sitting in my new corner office overlooking Elliott Bay when Kane knocked on my door. We just got the renewal notification, he said, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. The Defense Department wants to extend our contract for another 5 years. $8.2 billion total. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the Seattle skyline. Morrison Security Systems now occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. We employed 85 people, all of them engineers and support staff who understood that good work speaks for itself. You know, what this means, I asked Kane. That we're officially too big to ignore? It means Sarah can go to whatever medical school she wants without worrying about student loans. It means Linda can focus on staying healthy instead of stressing about insurance coverage. And it means we've proved something important. What's that? That experience beats entitlement every single time. Kane nodded. Speaking of which, did you see the article about Scarlett? I hadn't, but Kane pulled it up on his tablet. Scarlett Whitfield had taken a job as a digital transformation consultant for a mid-sized marketing firm in Portland. The article mentioned her extensive background in technology leadership but didn't specify any actual accomplishments. She was 33 years old and already a cautionary tale. Think she learned anything? Kane asked. Probably not. People like that usually don't. They just find new ways to blame everyone else for their failures. My assistant buzzed in. Mr. Morrison, there's a call for you on line 2, says it's personal. I picked up the phone. Caleb Morrison. Caleb, it's Garrett Williams. I sat up straight. Garrett was the founder of Apex, the man who'd built the company from nothing before Maxwell took over and turned it into a corporate power play. I hadn't spoken to him since his retirement party 5 years ago. Garrett, good to hear from you. How's retirement treating you? Well enough. Listen, I called because I wanted to tell you something. I heard about what happened with Scarlett and Maxwell, about the patent theft and everything that followed. Yeah, that was a rough time. I also heard how you handled it, using the legal framework instead of burning the place down, building something new instead of just destroying something old. I wasn't sure where he was going with this. It seemed like the right approach. It was. You remember what I used to say about innovation requiring integrity? Of course. Well, I wanted you to know that what you did, protecting your work through proper channels, building a legitimate business, treating your employees fairly, that's what I had in mind when I started this company. That's the legacy I hoped someone would carry forward. I felt something loosen in my chest. Recognition from Garrett meant more than all the government contracts and press coverage combined. Thank you, Garrett. That means a lot. Keep doing what you're doing, son. The industry needs more people like you. After I hung up, I walked over to the window. Below, Seattle was going about its business. People heading to work, building things, solving problems, creating value, the way it should be. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Lunch today? Sarah's home from med school for the weekend. I typed back, absolutely. 12:30? Perfect. She wants to tell you about her residency applications. Our daughter was in her 3rd year of medical school planning to specialize in oncology. She'd told us it was because of watching Linda go through cancer treatment, seeing how the right doctors could make all the difference between hope and despair. At lunch, Sarah was excited about her residency interviews. I heard back from Johns Hopkins yesterday, she said. They want me for their oncology program. Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Can you believe it? Johns Hopkins. I can believe it, I said. She's got her mother's intelligence and her father's stubbornness. That's a winning combination. Sarah laughed. Dad, you know the best part? I don't have to worry about the financial side. Because of Morrison Security Systems, I can choose my residency based on the best training, not the best salary. That's the point, I told her. Money should enable good choices, not force bad ones. Later that afternoon, I was back in the office when Agent Reynolds called. We'd kept in touch over the past 2 years. Partly professional courtesy, partly genuine friendship. Thought you'd like to know, she said. We just closed the last of the cases related to the Apex situation. 3 executives pled guilty to securities fraud. Scarlett got 2 years probation and a $500,000 fine. Justice served, as much as it ever is. But honestly, what you did was more effective than anything the legal system could have accomplished. You didn't just punish the bad behavior. You proved there was a better way. After she hung up, I sat quietly in my office for a while. Outside, the sun was setting over Puget Sound, painting the water gold and orange. Tomorrow, I'd come back to work on projects that mattered, with people I trusted, building systems that would protect important things. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how everything went down, if I wish I'd handled things differently, been less patient, more aggressive. The answer is always no. Revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so good that their failure becomes inevitable. It's about proving that integrity isn't just a nice idea, it's a competitive advantage. Scarlett thought she could steal 15 years of my work in a 10-second announcement. What she didn't understand was that you can't steal knowledge, experience, or reputation. You can only borrow the appearance of those things, and eventually, the bill comes due. The system I built didn't just protect intellectual property. It protected the principle that good work should be rewarded and bad behavior should have consequences. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and principled enough, justice doesn't just get served. It gets served with interest.